Okay, guys, welcome to the Fiddle webinar on inventory and operations management for CPG brands. I'm Morgan. I'm one of the co-founders here over at Fiddle. We're excited to have you guys on today for this webinar. And so today we're actually going to take a little different approach. A lot of webinars that we've attended that I imagine some of you have attended, they go into really defining inventory and kind of looking into the different ways of tracking inventory, but we want to kind of come at it from a CPG brand standpoint and really focus on the keys to success as well as some of the pain points that we see so many brands running into. So we'll go ahead and just jump in, right? And so the things that we're going to hit on today really come down into the overview of a brand growing, trying to get into other channels, trying to really nail their margins, track their costs. And so we have this nice graph here that kind of looks into production. We are going to assume that most everybody attending is part of the process in making their product with a co-packer in-house. And it's not just buying the final finished good from overseas and sending it to a 3PL. Okay, so in this specific webinar about inventory management for CPG brands, we really will go into tracking your own raw goods and packaging to send over to your co-packer or to bring in-house to do your own production, and how your landed costs come into play, as well as tracking inventories at multiple locations during this time and setting reorder points. And so this is just a nice kind of graph to reference the different parts of the process when trying to nail your operations for your CPG brand. And so the items that we really will go into today are product costing at each level of the process. Right. We run into so many startups, so many growing brands, 1 to 2 to 3 million that aren't really accounting for landed costs, that are missing some of those fees that come into to determine your margins. Right. And so with that said, we'll get into lot tracking, batch tracking, expiration dates, because in the CPG world, the food and beverage world, pet food, beauty and wellness, we really need to understand when our items are going to expire, and kind of especially the raw materials as well as the finished goods. And then we'll get into kind of the supplier management and relationships and understanding that in the world we live in with, COVID and supply chain issues, it's imperative to have, backup plans for ingredients, for packaging, maybe not so much your co-packer, but definitely some options, second and third, when kind of streamlining that process. And then we'll get into tracking multiple channels and when is the right time to move, if you're just on Amazon or just selling in Shopify, to move to, a fair marketplace or to go brick and mortar. And these are some of the things that we're going to dive into a little more during this webinar. We're actually going to keep it pretty short today. It'll be about 10, 15 minutes. We'll open it up to some Q&A, and happy to chat offline afterwards with anybody that has more questions. And just to give you a bit background, Fiddle software is about 5 years old. The company itself is about 3 years old, and we really understand the modern CPG brand and co-packing and contract manufacturing, right? So we'll go ahead and talk a little statistics. In the SMB world, 43% of brands and retail are not tracking inventory closely or just doing it in manual spreadsheets. And spreadsheets are great to start off, right? You can manipulate them, you can change things out, you can kind of get your systems in place. And so it's just a great tool. The problem comes when the complexity increases, right? As you need to automate purchase orders, as you need to look into lots, as you need to track production and know everything in your bill of materials and recipes that you need to source, the spreadsheets kind of become a burden, and the manual entries just increase significantly, right? And then a lot of times the accuracy is just off. Spreadsheets are hard to integrate with things and kind of keep that data updated if orders are coming in from multiple channels, if you have inventory sitting at multiple 3PLs, at a co-packer, at a warehouse. And so what we kind of like to ask, in the beginning, to brands when we're talking to them and kind of doing a needs audit or learning about them, if we were to say, could you tell us in real time what you have in inventory for a raw material, a packaging component, your products, and even some of the bundles, without having to reach out to a partner at a 3PL or a co-packer, or, if you have that insight and that data in your own software database or spreadsheet, and how accurate really is it, right? And so these brands that are accurate and have a good understanding of inventory at each level are going to be the ones that win and succeed. So landed costs. This one hits home for me. Previous business about 15 years ago, we weren't great at tracking landed costs. We just talked to a beauty wellness company here recently, and they're only about a year and a half old. And she kicked it off herself. She sourced from overseas, kind of had a co-packer assemble the products. And she was just adding the freight and customs and taxes and fees in as a line item in expenses in accounting software. And so she really wasn't kind of putting that into the COGS, the cost of that product. And as we all know right now, margins have to be good, and customs and shipping are a huge expense, especially with things skyrocketing in the last 6 months when bringing them from overseas. And so she was spending money on marketing and, kind of incentives through Instagram and other partner programs. And the thing that came in to play after, 9 months of thinking she had like 60-70% margins is after all the fees were kind of dialed in, she really only had 20 to 22%. And this really, hurt her because she thought she was making money and had money to spend on marketing. And unfortunately, she didn't. Like her margins were off, and she wasn't profitable at the end when she thought she had been. And so when you send that first PO out to a supplier, it's just going to have usually your price per line item. It could be a tolling fee, or it could be the actual price for that product or that material. Now, the customs, the freight, the shipping it's going to come in after the fact, right? And so a lot of times if we're doing manual POs in an Excel spreadsheet, Google Doc, it's hard to get those fees dialed in and to run reports to see your true COGS, right? To see that, oh, okay, my landed fully loaded cost is actually not, $1.99, it's $2.45, and I just lost, 46 cents per product sold. So it's really important from the beginning to understand those margins and to make sure you're dialing all the costs, and getting that into your true landed costs and run reports to see that. And so, especially in the beginning, if you're able to adjust pricing to account for this or pass it on through shipping to the customer, potentially that could help make a company more profitable. And then that way you understand your true inventory costs when you bring them all the way in to sell and to produce, right? Production costs, right? There's even more that goes into production costs. And we are seeing this kind of more and more contract manufacturers and co-packers are being established just as on this almost the same rate as brands are coming out and finding niche categories. So during COVID, it just increased significantly. So many more brands came out and sold online. And we're working with co-packers. And I think there's something like a 13% increase in small to medium-sized warehouses for co-packers and 3PLs. And what they're saying is, hey, we can do smaller runs, we can help the startups, we can help these brands. But with that said, you just have to understand that if you're going to source your raw goods, your packaging, your labels, and send it to a co-packer, and then have them go ahead and do all the tolling and the packaging and then ship it off to a 3PL, when they're done, if you're doing small runs more often, it's really important that you know straight away what's left over. And if it's really on demand, co-packing, then you're gonna have to reorder almost everything and get it back over there for the next production run. And the hard thing is you at first you may have 2 or 3 months in between each run, and it's not a big deal. But as your sales increase and you grow quickly, those runs are going to shorten, and you're just going to have that sourcing from your suppliers dialed in, right? And so when you bring that price in from overseas, it might be a label, it might be some raw ingredient. You have to understand that you need the landed cost for that, and then you need your tolling fee at the co-packer, and then you need to roll that in as your costs for that good. And then as you learn the timelines from your suppliers and kind of packaging vendors, that you can start setting reorder points, right? And so when you go through a production run and deplete all your goods that went into it, then you can get notifications on when it's time to reorder each item for the next run. And again, when you do that in spreadsheets, there's no way to set reorder points and notifications. Excuse me. And so a software that understands this complexity as you're scaling and growing will help you dial that in. And also, it gives you a check and balance for your co-packer, right? If you have a system that says, all right, I have 5 raw ingredients, I have, a label, I have a bottle, I have a top, and you can deplete those, kind of your theoretical yield, like what it should have been after producing maybe, 5,000 items. Then you can kind of say, hey, this is what should have been left over. You might have a 2, 3, 5% loss in there somewhere, scrap, waste. And then when your co-packer comes back to you and shows you, hey, after that run, this is what we show is left for the next run. And you can compare that. And so if you don't have that data and you don't track it yourself, then you're just trusting the co-packer is very efficient and has your brand in their interest to produce right and not waste or scrap or use product for other clients. So that is a really good thing to think of, is when you are partnering with co-packers, is to have your own insight to check how the run went. Hope that makes sense. If there's any questions, feel free just to shoot them over and we can get to them. Now, lot tracking expiration dates are interesting in the CPG world, especially food and beverage. When you go big box store and you go kind of supply like the chains, the store chains, they're going to want to know that you have recall and compliance docs in place, and especially if you get some certifications. You want to be organic, you want to be gluten-free, you want to have these certifications so you can sell into specific niches. It's important that you're tracking all that, right? And so having a tool that helps you kind of generate any kind of production documents, helps you track certificate of analysis, helps you kind of create lot numbers when you receive items. It just takes a lot of the burden of having to do it yourself in spreadsheets, right? And really kind of will give you, some averages across lots, and will let you know expiration dates. And so it's a nice tool that as you're growing and scaling and adding multiple channels to adopt, right? So let's say you're rolling out a protein bar and you're going to sell it on Shopify. Right out the gate, your co-packer is going to maybe assign the lot. You don't necessarily need to have tons and tons of automation built into that. But as you take on a second channel marketplace, an in-store sell, it's really important to have all that that you control, right? That you can have insight into it in case anything happens, contamination, wrong ingredients, nuts get mixed into, an item you say is like allergen free. Then you can have control of recall and look into all that and keep your brand safe and your brand valuable by the customers you're selling it to. So hope that all makes sense. One other thing, that we like to kind of tap into for CPG brands and managing inventory and understanding your costs is the supplier relationship, right? Lead times come into play quite a bit, especially now with the headaches of supply chain, the price breakdown by tier, right? In the beginning, when you need really low MOQs, it's nice to find suppliers that will provide that, right? And inevitably, you're going to have to overbuy occasionally on certain items to get enough in for a production run. And so having a system that helps you track that and kind of give you insight into those numbers is a key to success, right? And again, we're talking CPG brands that are involved in the manufacturing, production in some aspect, as well in that need kind of lot and batch tracking to kind of grow their brand, right? So that you can have those things checked off. So when you go to pitch, Costco, Sam's, Target, the chains, and Whole Foods and others like this, that you have everything that they want to see and that you're a great brand to work with, right? And also as you're selling online, that you're providing products and you've checked to make sure everything is kosher and good to sell, right? And so kind of having insight into supplier lead times, their MOQs, tier breakdown is just a great tool to help you be successful and scale. And then to also kind of have a look into when you do order from set suppliers, are they actually fulfilling and sending things on time and when they said they would, right? Because that helps you dial in your lead time and your production runs. A company that just went public, actually, Trigger Grills, has a great supply chain solution where they were able to really kind of nail their process and kind of really create a flow that helped them scale just through the roof, and not have to hold on to tons and tons of inventory, which when you hold on to inventory, that's just literally cash sitting on the shelves, right? And so a great example of a bigger company that's been just really successful. So moving on to sales channels, right? If you're selling just one channel, it's actually usually pretty easy to track that channel. Now, as you're adding the marketplaces, there's tons of food, beverage, beauty and wellness, different marketplaces coming up that you can sell on to get your brand out there and increase revenue, right? D2C, Amazon, as well as brick and mortar and distributors. And so you want to bring that into a central location, right? If you try to track it all through Shopify, it's going to be really tough, even though Shopify is phenomenal and has great tools to plug into Walmart, to Etsy, to eBay, to others to bring that in. As soon as you add a distributor, as soon as you add a chain, it's going to be really hard to say, hey, I sold, 500 orders on Shopify this week, and I had these pallets go out. Where am I hitting my reorder point? Do I need to produce? So just bringing that all into one place, one central location, so that you can kind of look into when do I need to produce? What's my burn rate? Do I have safety stock? And these things that ultimately, if you run out of stock on Amazon, you're going to be dinged significantly. If you run out of stock for a store or Shopify, it's going to hurt your brand and your relationship with that seller, right? So making sure that you kind of are tracking those sales, and if you have a great product and you have a great brand, those sales are going to increase really rapidly, and you just need to have kind of things set in place so that you can handle that growth. So kind of going on to some of the things that we went over, keys to success, having these systems in place, having the data to be able to present will always help you raise money and connect with capital, and find that funding to grow your business, right? Having insight at your co-packer, at your 3PL, in your own database, in your own software, just gives you that reassurance and the real-time information to set reorder points, to send more items over to your 3PL to make sure you don't run out of stock, instead of waiting on those partners to update you. And then lead times, if you can bring down the lead times and have a short production, kind of ordering, sourcing, production timeline, then you don't actually have to spend as much money up front to buy bulk. You can produce more often, and you don't have as much inventory in stock that's going to hurt your cash flow. So dialing that supply chain is huge. Understanding accuracy, again, at all locations and COGS is just going to set you up for success. And there's a lot of moving parts, and we understand that. And so that's kind of one of the reasons Fiddle exists today, is the modern CPG brand that is working with co-packers, that's working with suppliers, as well as the 3PL and distributors, needs a modern tool that they can roll up quickly, and get out the door, get value from straight away, right? And so, we connect with some of the best softwares in the space, and we're excited just about the future of helping CPG brands grow and scale the business. So that's kind of the webinar today. I hope it was helpful to see just the items that you need to nail to be successful. We talk to brands every day, all day, about their pain points. And inevitably, it starts within spreadsheets, just not having the insight and the data available to make the right decisions at the right time. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to chat them, let us know. And if not, we'll go ahead and take this recording and put it up on our website so you can reference it, and feel free to reach out to us.